Last year, John Purple came to my office and handed me a really cool-looking brown book and said, Carl, you need to read this book. And I read it, and he came back and he said, did you like the book? And to be honest with you, it's very hard to say I like the book because it's a book that disturbs you. It's not a book that you necessarily love. It's a book that shakes you up and forces you to look at the way that you spend your money, you spend your time, and where you invest your life. And as we talked about it, we said, this would be a great person to bring to campus. And then we thought a little bit more about the power that the book had in our lives and said, wouldn't it be great if we sent this book to every member of our freshman class so that before they even arrive on campus, they can start thinking about what it means to follow Jesus Christ, what it means to keep Jesus Christ right at the very center. What you see today is really a testimony to the heart of our freshman class. This whole effort started when one freshman read the book and posted a message on Facebook that said, wouldn't it be cool if we did this when Palmer comes to campus? So that's what resulted in this effort to collect shoes for the effort in Liberia. Palmer Chinchan grew up in Liberia. He's the pastor of The Grove in Chandler, Arizona. He's written 2 books, True Religion and God Can't Sleep. Before I welcome him to campus, there's one more thing that I need to do. Let's take off my shoes. Palmer, welcome to Cedarville.
That is great, Dr. Ruby. Cedarville, good morning. Thank you for having me. And Dr. Ruby, thank you so much for not just taking off your shoes, but allowing your freshmen to do this, and all of your students. Dr. Brown, thank you for letting us do this morning, and thank you for having me. Dean Purple, I love your passion. And we got to start by giving some props to the freshmen. Can we give all the freshmen a hand here this morning? Because, I mean it, I love their passion here. I love the passion of freshmen, period. Most of you freshmen, you still think you're at camp, don't you, right now? You do. You're raiding dorms at night, throwing water balloons. I know that. But here's the problem. Really soon, they're going to start asking for things called papers, and you're going to have to read books. And they're actually going to grade you here. So but enjoy it while it lasts. You heard Dr. Ruby say that I've been an expatriate. I grew up in Africa. I've spent about half my life there. I'm a writer. I speak sometimes, and I lead a church in Arizona called The Grove. But here's what I'm most about. What I'm most about is trying to convince people that this world is a broken place. But it doesn't have to be that way, because God wants to use your life. You see, you have one, and it's a very important life. And He wants to use your life to change what's not right in this world. Not everyone gets that. They really don't. Even Christians not always get that. And for example, I did not think the people at the church I lead called The Grove were bothered enough by the fact that 1.2 billion people go barefoot every day. And so I stood up on a Sunday morning and I said, we're going to have a Barefoot Sunday here. And I said, I want you to wear your best and your favorite shoes to church, and then I want you to leave them here and spend the rest of the day barefoot so you can empathize with how 1.2 billion people live. And then we're going to give your shoes away in Africa. Well, when I got home later that day, I have 4 sons, and they sat around the table. They said, Dad, that was the worst idea ever. They said, Dad, no one's going to come to church on Barefoot Sunday, Dad. Good news. Well, then I get to my staff meeting, and all my staff, they're down on me too. They're haters. And one of them said, Palmer, it's September, it's going to be really hot still. I think we should buy everyone at church Japanese slippers to wear home. I said, I'm not buying stinking Japanese slippers for everyone to wear home. We planned the Barefoot Sunday. The morning of Barefoot Sunday, my wife gets up early. She looks at the paper. She said, oh no, it's a record high. It's going to be 107 degrees today. And I said, good, people's feet will sizzle on the asphalt, and they'll remember what it's like to go barefoot. The good news is my sons were wrong. When all 3 of our worship services that Sunday were packed, and we ended up with mountains of shoes, a lot like this. We ended up with over 2,000 pairs of shoes that Sunday. But then my problem was I had no plan for how we were going to give these away in Liberia, is where I wanted to take them first. It's a country that was recovering from a civil war. And then it hit me. Some of my college students the summer before when I was there had rented dirt bikes for $10 a day. So I thought, we'll give these shoes away on dirt bike. We'll go into villages, down the jungle trails, and do that. I came back from that, and then last fall, I started to announce that we're going to have our second annual Barefoot Sunday at my church, The Grove. And people said, and I had a few people pull me aside and said, Palmer, we already did this. Why do we need to do it again? And when people ask me that, I tell them about Malawi. I tell them about the time I took a team of Wheaton College students there, and one of my teams was were basketball players, and we showed up at a gym we were going to play at in Lilongwe, and we stood at the door, and as we're standing there waiting to practice before our game that night, I saw some of my guys laughing and pointing, and I said, what's so funny? And they said, well, look, Palmer, there's a guy playing. This is the team that we're going to play later that night was practicing. They said, look, there's a guy playing with a shoe on his right foot, and he's barefoot on his left. And then, look, that other guy has a shoe on his left foot, and he's barefoot on his right. And they said, it's the funniest thing we've ever seen. And so I turned to my brother, and I said, why are these guys playing with a couple of them with just one shoe on? And he said, well, what happened, Palmer, is one of the guys showed up with no shoes. A guy in his early 20s was barefoot, and so his friend did not want him to be embarrassed when you, the Americans, got here, and so he took off one of his shoes, so at least he would have one shoe on when you got here. And of all the things, there's a lot of things that bother me in Africa, yes, but for some reason, that just kind of sat in my gut. And so each time back to Malawi or Liberia or Zambia, I would take a suitcase of shoes with me. And then I started asking other people to take suitcases of shoes with them. And then finally I told my church, I can't do this by myself. I need you to help. There's too many people. And so that's why we had our first Barefoot Sunday. And then we had our second one last fall. And our second Barefoot Sunday, we had over 4,000 pairs come in on one Sunday morning, which was great. One of the reasons we had 4,000 pairs come in is one young lady by the name of Shalene emailed me, and she said, Palmer, I cleaned out my closet. I'm bringing every pair that I own. She said, but I hate to tell you, it's 80 pairs of shoes. 80. Holy 9 West sale. That's a lot of shoes. And then remember, I tell everyone to go barefoot. I had a friend named DJ text me between services, and he said, Palmer, he said, my family just got kicked out of a restaurant, and I don't want to tell you what restaurant it is because I don't want you to not eat there. That's not my point. But he said, they kicked us out because we're barefoot. It was awesome. But here's the thing with the shoes. In many ways, the shoes are just a picture of what's wrong out there and that we can do something about it. You see, sometimes we look at the problems of this world and we think they're too big or we think they're not my problem. And I want to say, no, God wants to use your life, your one and only life, to change what's not right out there. And maybe you can't put shoes on 1.2 billion bare feet, but one university can put shoes on 3,200 pairs of bare feet. One church can put shoes on 4,000 bare feet. You can put a pair of shoes on one person's bare feet, and that makes a world of difference. And so I often say this, the way you live every day matters, because the way you live every day is a picture of your soul. And we forget that. In James chapter 1, and we'll be looking at James 1 and 2 this morning, Jesus' brother, he says makes this simple statement, religion that God accepts as pure or true is to look after orphans and widows in their distress. And he says, if your religion is true, if it's right, then for example, you'll care about the orphans and the widow. And it's because of this verse in part that I wrote a book titled True Religion. I also took the title of the book from a pair of jeans. And by the way, there are jeans out there called True Religion brand jeans. And if you're wearing True Religion jeans this morning, it's okay. Sit easy. Just on your way out, just put your hands right here and walk out like that. And we won't. But it's not about the jeans. The jeans are in many ways a metaphor, and they are. But I'd heard about these jeans that were called True Religion. They're popular with the Hollywood crowd and the fabulously wealthy and college students in Ohio. And I heard about these, but I didn't believe how expensive they were until I walked into a store, and I don't want to mention the store name because maybe you won't shop there, and that's not my point, but I look at these jeans, I pick them up, and they're $348 plus tax. Over $350 for one pair of jeans, and I thought, man, that's expensive. And on my way home, for some reason, I started to think about a Malawian by the name of Jafali. Jafali had come in, I was teaching in Malawi at a Christian college, and Jafali asked to meet with me and my wife, and he sat down with us, and he said, Dr. Chinchin, he said, I need to borrow some money to build my house, and I'm wondering if you could lend me money to build a house. He said, you know, my wife's having a baby, and we live in just one room, and I need to build our house. I said, you want me to give you a home loan, Jafali? And he said, yes. I said, well, how much are we talking about? And he says, 4,000 kwaches. I go, 4,000 kwaches. And so I did the math in my head, and Jafali was asking for $35. I said, $35? You can build a house for 4,000 kwaches, $35? And he goes, yeah. He said, the mud bricks are a kwacha each. I just need a few bags of cement for mortar, and then I need some 2x4s, and I'm going to put thatch on the roof. And so I said, Jafali, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to amortize this over 30 years at 6.2% with an easy qualifier, 10% down. I didn't say that. I said, I gave him the $35. But my point is this. Let's say you had the choice. Not that you have the choice, but let's say you have the choice to either buy a pair of jeans, and it could be anything for that matter, for $350. But then you had the choice to also help 10 men in Africa build houses for their families. And if you had that choice, and maybe you had that choice, but then you chose to buy the jeans, then I'm sorry to say, I doubt your religion is very true. In fact, I would say your religion is a little messed up. And that's not how I say it. That's how James says it in James 2:14. He says, what if someone comes to you, and a brother or sister, and they said, I'm cold, and I need some clothes or something to eat, and I'm hungry, and you said, hey, you just pat them on the back, go and be well fed. Then James says, your religion is kind of messed up. You see, the way you live matters. Because the way you live every day is a picture of your soul, of what's going on the inside. Sometimes we make this life after God about this something that is so spiritual that it doesn't affect the way we live. And I want to say, no, the way Jesus said to live changes what you do every day. And so I use this line for the subtitle of the book, of my book, True Religion. I use the line, so take a piece of heaven, or taking pieces of heaven to places of hell on earth. And that's my challenge. And people say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, first I'll say, I really think in this life, God gives us glimpses of heaven, doesn't he? I think sunsets and beaches and rainbows are a bit of heaven. I think chubby little babies are a bit of heaven. I think dinner with friends is a bit of heaven. I think falling in love in college at Cedarville is a bit of heaven. That happens, doesn't it? I think Krispy Kreme donuts are a bit of heaven. They are. You see what I mean, don't you? But then at the same time, there are places that are like hell on earth. And people say this to me, they say, Palmer, your language is too harsh. It's not really like that. And I go, really? Because I know that right now, because I've seen that it is like that, because right now in Haiti, I know that when mothers run out of flour, they start to make cookies for their children out of mud. And if there's a place in this world where mothers are making cookies for their children out of mud, then that's a place of hell on earth. When 6-year-old girls in Thailand are traded for sex, that's a place of hell on earth. When every 30 seconds a child dies in Africa from malaria, a completely preventable disease, that's a place of hell on earth. When women in Afghanistan are stoned to death for adultery, a sin not a whole lot different than the ones you and I commit all the time. When that happens, then that's a place of hell on earth. And my point is, you and I we better do something about it. We can applaud that because that challenge is for all of us. Thank you. And sometimes we think it's someone else's problem. And I want to say, no, it's not. Your faith will require that you do something, and James uses the word action. In James 2:18, we read this. This is from the ISV, and I like the use of the word action. But someone may say, you have faith, but I have actions. He says, show me your faith without any actions, and I will show you my faith by my actions. And so I say, sometimes you must act in order to stop the very worst things from happening. That's how Jesus walked on this earth. Do you remember he was on his way into Capernaum? You read this in John chapter 8. and he comes upon a gang of men standing there with rocks in their hands, and they're about to stone a woman for adultery. And so they look at him and they say, "Hey, Rabbi, what do you say we should do?" And so Jesus, rather than answer them with words, we read, he got down and he begins to write in the sand. You know, for years there's been conjecture by theologians as to what he wrote in the sand. And I've been researching this lately, and for the first time anywhere, I'm going to tell you exactly what Jesus wrote in the sand. He got down and he wrote this. He wrote, "The first one of you that throws a stone at this beautiful Hebrew girl, I am going to beat you down like Chuck Liddell in an MMA cage fight." That's exactly how he said it. Now that's my opinion. You're entitled to your own. I think I'm right, because when he looked up, we read they were gone. They had scattered. And it was like that everywhere he went. Yes, he talked about your soul and eternity, but he came to change life right now. It's a both and, it's a not an either or. It's not, do I preach or do I put shoes on bare feet? It's a both and if you only do one and not the other, you miss it. That's why I say sometimes you must act in order to stop the worst things in this world from happening. I had a moment kind of like that a couple of summers ago. I was in Nairobi, and I was heading to the airport early in the morning, and my taxi was maybe doing 60 miles an hour down this highway, 4-lane highway, when all of a sudden a minivan in front of me changed lanes right in front of us and hit the rear quarter panel of a matatu. Matatu is a passenger minivan stuffed with maybe 17, 18 people. And when he clipped the back panel, it started to fishtail and swerve. And then the matatu, full of people, flipped on its side, skidded down the highway, then it rolled on its roof, and the roof collapsed. And the windows all went from maybe this big to like this. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm straight, my very first thought was, Palmer, that's someone else's problem. You're going to miss your flight. You have a team waiting for you in Liberia. You're going to miss your flight. Someone else will take care. That's, if I'm honest, that was my very first thought. And then I thought this, in that nanosecond, it hit me, no, Palmer. You keep telling people that the way you live every day matters. And so I yelled at my driver, stop, and he hits the brakes, and he jumps out with me. And we run to the van, and we start to ease people out between the broken glass, and people come around from the side of the road to help us out. And soon, in less than 5 minutes, we have everyone out, and it's just a few cuts and bruises. And I'm thinking now, bravo, Palmer, see, well done. Good thing you stopped. That was good. Just when I'm thinking that, my driver yells, they're killing the other driver. And I turn, and just maybe 15, 20 feet away behind me is a gang of men. They call it mob justice in East Africa. It's a sick form of justice. They're kicking and stoning and punching this guy to death, the guy that caused the accident. And so without thinking at all, I sprint toward the mob, and I push my way to the middle, and I drop down on my knees over his head, and my thinking is, at least he'll have to hit me first. And then I start yelling at the guys with the rocks that are still kicking him. I'm saying, no, stop. And they're saying, we want to kill him, get out of the way. And I'm going, no, I'm not getting out of the way. He's not dying today. And as I stayed over him slowly, I'm saying to him, you've got to get up. These guys want to kill you. And as I stay with him on my knees, trying to get him to sit up and move him to the side of the road, slowly these guys drop their rocks and they walk away. And I share that, and here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying Palmer Chinchin is a hero. I'm nothing like that. I'm just trying to point out that Jesus calls us to live out our faith every day. And my point is that what you do with your life matters. That sometimes you have to do something, not someone else, to stop the worst things in this world from happening. And on the flip side, I'll say this, sometimes you must act in order for the very best things to happen. That's how it was with Jesus. Remember in Mark 5, we read of him walking into a family's home, and a girl's laying down on the bed, and they said she's dead. And he looks down at her, and he says, Talitha Koum. He says, she's not dead. She's not dead. And he takes her hand, and she sits up. You think there was some celebrating and jumping up and down in that house. You see, Jesus always acted in order for the very best things to happen. When I talk about this, I share about a girl named Katie from the Grove. Katie walked into my office before I had a different team leaving for East Africa. And she had an envelope in her hand, and she said, Palmer, she said, here's my babysitting money from the last 2 months. She said, it's $100. She said, would you do something for the kids in Africa? And I said, yeah, what do you want me to do for the kids in Africa? And she said, well, you'll know. I said, Katie, I don't know. She said, you'll know. I said, okay. So I took her envelope, and I didn't know what I would do with it, but I had several teams. One of my teams was, again, doing basketball clinics on high school campuses, and we ended up on the most dilapidated basketball campus or basketball court I've ever seen in Africa. In fact, we had to use duct tape and coat hangers to get a backboard up and the rim to stay up, and there was grass growing in the asphalt. And after we were done, I pulled Dowd aside. Dowd was a Malawian that invited us. I said, Dowd, you got to tell the principal of this high school to fix his court. You can't promote basketball ministry with a court like this. And he said, I've told him, but he said, there's no money. I said, well, Dowd, how much could it cost to fix these rims? He said, maybe to get the lumber and a carpenter and a welder, maybe $50 to fix that one and maybe $50 to fix that one, about $100. I said, you know what, Dowd, a girl named Katie Ponson has just sent you $100 to do that. So I left the money with him. A month later, he sent Katie an email and some JPEGs. And these are some of the pictures he sent. And his email said, Katie, we've hired a carpenter and a welder, and they fixed the backboards. And then the kids cleaned the court up. And then the students took some white paint and they restriped the court. And the day was done. They were so excited, they invited another school over to play them. But before the game, they thought it would be appropriate to honor you. So around the circle in the middle of the court, they've painted the words, the Katie Ponsonis basketball court. You see, so who's the blessed one now? We think that when we go, someone else is blessed, and yes, they are. But sometimes the things that God calls us to do changes who we are, and we become the blessed ones. And so I'll say this morning, and don't miss this, that when you start to take a bit of heaven to the places of hell on earth, God does something in your life. And I write about the transformation that happens. I think there's a kind of spiritual change that happens in our lives, that when you give your life away to change what's broken in this world, God changes you. That there's this spiritual shaping that only happens when we go to the places that are desperate. And educators call, at least when it comes to learning, educators call when your mind is disturbed. They say we learn best when cognitively we're disturbed. It's cognitive disruption or disequilibration. When that happens, that's when we learn best. I think it's the same with our soul. That when we go to the places that disturb us and absolutely rock us to the core and bother us, we start to live different, and it changes who we are as a person. I think there are many Christians that live in this country that have maybe cut a check or prayed a lot for people in other places, but had never done anything with their lives. And I'll tell you right now, there's a spirituality that has never been shaped in their lives. I had a Cedarville student write me a Facebook message before I came. He's a freshman. And it was a long Facebook message, about like this. I scrolled down forever on my iPhone trying to read it. And he started the message by saying, Palmer, your book bothered me. And I thought, oh no, he's a hater. But then I kept reading, and he wasn't. He said, no, it bothered me in the best of ways. And that's what I'm saying. When God bothers you, you start to live different. And it doesn't happen always from here. Often we have to go. And so I end with this challenge, to act now and to do something incredible for God with your life today. In Matthew 6, Jesus talks about the kingdom. In fact, the kingdom of God is maybe the most talked about thing that he spoke of. And he said, the kingdom, and he prayed this, it's a prayer we all know well. And he says, pray like this, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So let me ask you this, is God's will only meant to be done, this kingdom of God only meant to be lived after we die? Or is it meant to be lived right now? Because sometimes we make this kingdom of God only now. Yes, it's for after we die, but it starts right now. Sometimes this kingdom of God we talk about as an interpersonal reality that happens on the inside, and it's this private experience with God. And if we keep it inside, then God never uses our life to change what's out there. And so I want to say, first of all, if you're going to live out this kingdom life that God calls us to, then you have to act. You must do something now. And I want to say right now, one great statement that's being made is your freshmen leaving their shoes. And we're going to close this morning, and I'm going to invite all of you here